Hello, my name is Jeffrey Cantor, and I have the privilege to have with me today a panel of healthcare professionals, all of whom have some level of experience with the interactive screening program. Developed by the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, ISP is a unique evidence-based program that helps identify those most at risk for suicide and connect them with the appropriate treatment. It has already proven to be extremely successful in businesses, colleges and universities, and other large organizations throughout the country. The purpose of this panel is to provide first-hand information to help you better understand this extraordinary program, its primary purpose, ancillary benefits, its implementation, and its broader impact. We will also explore some of the things you may wish to consider when assessing its potential use for your particular setting. Before we begin our conversation, I'd like the panel to introduce themselves.
I'm Dr. Beth Krako. I'm a licensed psychologist.
I'm Dr. Lauren Moffitt. I'm a licensed psychologist.
I'm Chris Owens, Metro Atlanta Area Director for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention.
I'm Dr. Stephen Garlow. I'm a psychiatrist.
I'm Dr. Josh Gunn, a licensed psychologist.
In your own words, how would you describe ISP?
It's a depression screener, and I think it's different from other depression screeners because you don't get an automated response saying you might be depressed, you should get help. You get a real response from a real person, a counselor, addressing the real problems that you're going through.
Developing the dialogue and engaging someone who is feeling lonely, hopeless, and maybe a slew of other things, and has not had any contact with anyone. We're really getting at the people who are isolated with this particular
What would you think sets this apart from other programs that are like it out there? I mean, from your perspective.
I think it's what Beth said. It's the ability to set up a dialogue with a living counselor on the other end of the computer.
Did anything exist prior? Was there any structure at all prior? I mean, how would one address the issue of identifying those at risk before something like ISP? Well, what would you do?
A system like this really did not exist before the ISP.
I mean, it's anonymous, but it's so active. I mean, you are talking exactly to the student that needs to be talked to about what they need to hear, and in their language, in their medium, which is the internet for most people these days.
I mean, is there a trend out there that you guys are noticing from your perspective that this is going to address specifically?
I mean, I think this gets at the huge number of students who are considering suicide or feeling distressed to that level that are not coming to the counseling center. I think that's the main point, is that these students are out there, but they're not the students that we know. They're talking to teachers, to friends, to coaches, or maybe they're talking to nobody. And this gives us a way of going out and getting them when they, for some reason, don't know how to come to us.
Right. I mean,
that's the one. I think the one that are not talking to anybody is the one that this is uniquely suited to getting. Someone sitting at home, sitting back in their dorm room, and they don't know to go to somebody, they're afraid to, they're too anxious, they're too stigmatized, and this comes to them maybe at a moment of need and says, are you feeling bad?
Right.
And that's the beginning of it.
They are the most isolated.
Right.
as counselors, you're both counselors, have you noticed a difference as counselors in how people come to you if they've gone through ISP versus those who would come to you before ISP or in your private practice?
Yes.
Can you talk about that a little?
I think that for students who have taken our questionnaire, we've generally had a dialogue with them already. So we've talked with them through the ISP, and so when they come in, we've already demystified a lot. We've already normalized potentially some things that they're going through, and we've also eased their concerns about, for certain students it's cost, for certain students it's other things that they've heard about or maybe weren't too sure about. And so when they do come in, it's almost like we've already met.
Staff who think this is great that their students have access to this and wish that they and their colleagues did as well.
I think it's UCSD. One of the medical schools out west where they used it, I think they actually did include the staff on it and the faculty and as sort of more than just the students.
Right. When you think about ISP and its approach, could somebody or all of you talk about the actual mechanism that happens from the first outreach to the population to the sort of the last step where you guys are still involved? Can somebody talk about that structure?
The first thing that I do is, I reach out to different schools and I would meet with them and everything. Then basically I hand it off to our national office. Ann Haas at the national office, Maggie Mortelli, and then they get involved in talking about all the technical issues.
Right, that's the implementation
yes,
in the in the environment. But once it's in an environment,
So what happens?
yeah, just actually
right.
take me step by step through.
An email comes out, goes out to the the sophomore class or some group in the at Emory now we're doing it in the graduate school, graduate students, and it basically says, are you depressed or are you feeling bad? The language in that can be worked with. If so, come to this website, set up an anonymous ID, fill out this questionnaire, and leave a it's doubly it's anonymous, so it's not going to the person's email address. The person on the other side doesn't know who the student is. I think that's the other element, at least initially on, to the thing that Beth said. When they finally come in, they feel like they actually know you, but they've been able to test the waters without you knowing who they are and build up some trust, and then they can reveal who they are. The counselor reviews that, sends a message back that goes through the system and ends up back to the student. And if the person's at risk, it says it's an invitation to come into the system or to engage in a dialogue. And it's when they get into the dialogue then that this notion of the relationship, and they can build a relationship safely. They can build it anonymously. And then that gives them the confidence to come in. Ultimately, the goal is to get them. It's not to do online counseling. The goal is to have them come in, in person for in-person evaluation, in-person treatment.
So you're suggesting it's an incremental, where each step has a level of protection that allows the participant to enter without risking exposure.
Sure.
Is that accurate?
And to choose the right next step for them. If it's asking more questions, if it's dialoguing further, developing more of a relationship, or if it's going ahead and coming in person, it sort of allows the student or the person who's using the system to choose at what pace that happens.
So there were options.
They can respond when they want, on their own time.
Right.
If they need to digest some information to think about things, they can do that.
Typically, when they've answered, you have a dialogue that might go back and forth a handful of times, maybe 3 times, a little less than 5, I would say, on average. But then there are a few that we've had where we're dialoguing quite a bit, and it feels a little bit like online counseling, which it's not. It's really continuing to educate. It's continuing to engage and build a relationship. And to me, it's always about building that relationship and trust so that somebody feels like they can come in and dispelling the myths.
So what do you find that once you've implemented this program, that you're changing the conversation, not just for the kids who are using it, but that all of a sudden it's seeping out into a larger population? Are you noticing that, or was that happening already? Is that impossible to make that connection?
I mean, I think that because of the system that we use at Emory in terms of engaging the faculty, the administration, that they are thinking about suicide as an issue much more broadly. And so not only are they interested in the ISP, but suddenly they're interested in this more targeted, personalized way of doing outreach. They're interested in and how they can personally also be involved in terms of identifying students who are at risk, knowing about resources, understanding how to persuade a student to get help. So they're interested overall in more services.
I think when people hear about it, they hear that we have it, they go, oh, well, of course we do. I mean, it's kind of like this obvious, you mean this wasn't always here? It's kind of like this obvious thing once it's there. That's one of the, you asked about when we try to get it into places, there's all these questions and all this sort of trepidation, and then once it's there, it's like, oh no, we've always, it's like it's always been here. It's like it's what we do. Especially when Lauren and Beth start talking about it in front of other mental health people, they suddenly recognize, oh wait, that's what we do, and it becomes much more natural and much more accessible. But when faculty hear about it, it's like, well, yeah, of course we do that. What do you mean we never did that?
I think that although you're increasing these services overall, part of it is that you're getting the students that you really, really need to see.
Yeah.
You're getting those students that have to be connected somewhere, really, really should be. Also, it gives you the opportunity to talk with students who might be thinking about the counseling center but not sure if it's appropriate, where other resources might fit. That's the thing, is we can be really flexible and help students find other sources of support. Again, a lot of students have very personal and very understandable reasons for not wanting to come to the counseling center maybe in the first place, and so we can help connect them somewhere else if it's appropriate without them needing to necessarily come in, or to do a very quick triage where we already know these are the resources the student might need, this is what they're going to come in with, instead of having no idea what's walking to the office next.
I think in the beginning, especially, and this is true, I think, for any setting, you're getting a sense of what the response is going to be like. You're not going to know until you do it. So it's a little bit of a, let's just see what happens, but we're always planful about it. I mean, we're always, in our counseling center, we leave slots open the week after we send out the response in hopes that people will come in. But we know that after we get them in, then we can, we'll make it work. These are the people that need to be seen. We feel that we should have them there. So I think there are ways to plan it out. And certainly at the beginning, it's a little bit of a, we're not sure what we're going to get. But then it becomes where you can predict a little bit, and you start to plan it out and map it out. So it's not this deluge, really, of people. It's quite planful.
Well, and it's funny because there was kind of the opposite when we first analyzed the first go around of it. We had 3 years of data, and people said, "Gee, you didn't get that many people coming in." And it's like, well, how effective is this? You didn't, you sent out all these thousands of emails, and you didn't get all these. You didn't get all these people coming back. It's like, yeah, but the people we got coming back were absolutely positively the kids who needed to come back, the ones most in need.
And I think I'd really like to echo what she's saying about just because you're trying to get some of these high-risk kids in doesn't mean that every one of them is going to obviously be in weekly individual therapy or some of the kind of time-intensive resources.
True.
There's lots of other options there. And I think for us, we sat down and said, what's our mission here on campus? Because we couldn't just look at it from a manpower kind of supply and demand issue. But what's our mission? And when we looked at what the ISP did, we were like, that fits it. Our job is to help those who need it most.
Is there an educational component? And is there other well, I guess it's a two-way educational component. Do you guys learn stuff about the student body that is not necessarily related to the issue of suicide that you still find useful? And also, is there an educational benefit to people who have expressed something where they're learning a little bit more about themselves because of ISP that is informing them in their mental health?
Students are able to see reflected back to them from a professional, you're describing some symptoms of a depressive episode, or this sounds like anxiety. Come in and let's be more clear, let's tailor that, let's see what this is really about. But you can really provide them with a lot of information, not only about mental health issues, but then also about the resources on campus. If not just the counseling center, where else can they go for this support? We have lots and lots of resources, and students are usually very surprised, I didn't even know there was somebody on campus that could help me with this specific issue. We see that a lot with academics, students who feel very trapped maybe in the system or feel like there's no advocate out there for them, and we can help connect them to that.
Anyone taking ISP is really having to think about, how am I doing as far as sleep? How am I doing as far as socially? Am I drinking more than I normally do or would? How is my eating? I mean, it's really check. What am I doing internal? How am I feeling internally? And what am I doing behaviorally? And that's really great training for any of us to use in order to function to our optimum.
Because it also doesn't just ask about depression, it asks about strong emotional states. Why am I angry all the time?
Yeah.
Why am I anxious all the time? Why am I feeling stressed or overwhelmed all the time? Those are exactly other things that it goes after.
So if you had, and we'll go down the line again, three things that you could say about ISP from your perspective. What 3 benefits of ISP?
Relationship building, stigma reduction, education.
I would say it's connecting to an individual to sources of support as well as to a campus or an organization as a whole. We're checking in on you. We care about you. Efficient. I think it's an incredibly efficient tool to use in terms of time and resources and speaking to who's necessary to speak to. And personalized.
Stigma reduction and education, which is big, and you're really getting the kids that might be in bed and just can't get out of bed, the kids that really do need the help.
Yeah, I mean, I would start with that. It gets those who most need help, those who most need to come in. It specifically reaches out and touches those people, and everybody else kind of selects themselves away from it. So the screening takes place with the person who reads the email, says, "Oh, I feel terrible." I feel great. I don't need to pay attention to that. I think there's an efficiency in that built in out at the student side, but the ability. The other thing I would say is the anonymous engagement. The initial anonymous engagement is really a critical aspect of it.
I love going last.
Don't take it personally.
I think it meets students where they are, and like you were talking about, it can be very targeted, and then kind of just what other people are saying. It's connection.